Scott Dworkin, welcome to Freedom Over Fascism.
Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited that you're here, and I've been following you for a really long time. And it seems, let me go back. So you have a newsletter and podcast that, as I understand it, attempts to translate what's going on at the national level, so people in their local levels can understand what they can do and where they can help. Is that accurate?
Yeah. No, it started with in 2016 when I was cutting through Trump's nonsense and what he was actually saying instead of you know um, innuendo or some cute catchphrase, and I was like, here's what he's actually. And so cutting through that nonsense, and so that's what's happening now is the same thing that happened when he was president, and so I'm just presenting the case with media and pointing out irregularities and things that are intentional, where it misleads people, misinformation and lies and things like that is what I've focused on more recently. And then also making sure that it's a fairly covered presidential election where Kamala Harris and Walz and Democrats get a fair shake, and where we're on the offensive, where people can actually see here's what happened. And a lot of times with President Biden, that wasn't happening. So now there's been more fair coverage, but it's still not there. So, fighting that messaging war is one of the biggest battles we have, and that's what we're on the front lines of right now.
Right. So, so give me the state of play, the way you see it right now. When we're recording this, is the first day of the DNC, and nothing's happened yet. And I talk a lot about how the legacy media is really just not doing its job. But I would love to hear from you on where you think they are going wrong, where you think they're going right, and what alternatives should people look to find good information.
Well, alternatives, obviously, on Substack, people like myself and you and Brian Tyler Cohen has joined us. Somebody who cusses a lot, but he's good at his writing. Jeff Tiedrich has been good as well. You have Mary Trump, you have Joyce, and you have, there's a lot of people, Heather as well. And there's a bunch of people who are doing great writing, mixed with activism sometimes. And so there's a ton of alternatives on Substack specifically. Then I would look to, me personally, I look at every side of things to see the full story and then try and get that all together to just get the truth, the basic truth out of it. So I'll look at right-wing media. I'll look at, what people would call, I guess, left-wing, which is basically truth at this point. And so I'll look at not reality in the right, and I'll look at reality in the left, and then I'll look at how mainstream media tries to split the difference to act like they have to, kind of balance out truth and lies. So I guess one of the things is I've seen, you can't balance out, you can't do both sides when one person's a pathological liar who's running as a dictator, and the other person is running for democracy and is not a pathological liar.
Right.
It's an unfair balance. It's a false equivalency where, they're acting like they're on an even kind of playing field when they're just not. It's a different kind of battle. It's more than just an election. It's a fight of truth versus lies. It's a fight of Trump's propaganda versus, again, cutting through with that truth. Biden was one of the first to really start to power through it, was doing great during his presidency with it. And then, it's become overwhelming, yet this hope and truth and joy has started to come through again with this resurgence of the Harris campaign. So I think what we've seen with legacy media, just my guess is money. We have money, we have people call it corporate oligarchs. Like, you have money involved, and then the fear of someone losing their job. So if you, one of the things when I was on cable, I never was afraid of losing my job. I didn't care if someone was going to fire me or do whatever, because I was like, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and you're going to deal with it, and that's it. And that's the kind of attitude I think a lot of people have to have if you go in one way. And the other way, you have to also be willing to put yourself on the line, your job on the line, and hope that your employer has your back. And so if you go in and you ask Trump questions, he needs to not be able to replace you. He needs to not be able to call your boss and say, I'm not letting this person in here again. That boss then needs to say, that's the only person we're sending. This is it. If you want to be on our network, if you want to be aired here, this is who you're going to be questioned by. Sort of like the White House press corps. Even though he tried to ban people, they were, oh, well, we're not sending anybody else. It's like, this is it. And we're not having that. We're not having people that are, they're kind of are towing a fake line where it's like, well, I don't want to make him mad where I'm banned at these false press conferences that he's had recently. But at the same time, I want to get an answer, but I can't push him too hard because if he gets visibly angry, he's going to call my boss. I'm going to either get fired, I'm going to get moved, or I won't be back here again. And that sort of, I don't even know if it's fear or if it's weakness. But not everybody is a Lawrence O'Donnell, a Joy Reid, a Rachel Maddow. You know what I mean? Like, Joy Reid is one of the first people don't really know this, but Malcolm Nance and Joy Reid were one of the first people to point out things that led to the Mueller report. Trump's Russian ties before the election. And this took guts because they could have easily lost their jobs over it. Obviously Trump attacked them and me and everybody else who was exposing this just as business ties at this point, not collusion and everything else that he tried to distract with it. But I think this has all evolved into a landscape where he has control over the press, and there are repercussions of access, which means less money for them.
Right.
Instead of them holding to the truth and consistency and having someone who can hold him accountable, they cater to him and they want that money and they want that access. So the next stupid thing that he says, they're in the front row. They can try and frame him whatever way they want so they don't make the right mad, but at the same time they can try and balance it to act like they're balanced. Like, oh, okay, look, we're going to cover Kamala Harris, and instead of just covering what she said in regards to a real economic policy, we're going to say that, we're going to repeat what Trump said and balance it in, and he'll run the headline. And that way we make more money, we have more clicks. And so thinking that way, putting the money first is the failure. Substack is where people put the ideas first, the thoughts first, the facts first, a lot of times mixed with opinion sometimes. And it's just a reality where people aren't bogged down by that money aspect. They're not dependent on one employer, one individual. It's the masses. And I think that, legacy media is going to go down in flames without major changes. And I think it's on us to call them out. So, there's a lot that they're doing wrong. One of the biggest things is repeating Trump and anything he's saying and acting like it's a fact. And then, but the right things that they're doing started to, after a lot of complaining by people internally, staff and other people, they didn't air his last press conference live on MSNBC. They didn't air parts of it on CNN. They, cut away and they did some fact checks. But then the next day, MSNBC's running on it. They're talking about it constantly. All the and repeating lies and things that he said, even though they were calling him out, they were still spreading them. And CNN doing the same thing. And the coverage of that press conference focused on how he had a quote unquote right, or whatever he said, to attack Kamala Harris. It's just the spin. It's gotten out of control. It's on us to try and stop it. There's no other way except for just kind of standing out in front and masses being like, enough, people canceling their subscriptions to papers, which sadly I hate to do because I've pushed people to subscribe before. We got to support folks, but now it's a different time, and I think you're going to see things like Midas and other more independent outlets start to rise and match or exceed a lot of those in legacy media. And I think the benefit to society is it splits the difference and makes it so they have to be more truthful, because those other outlets, Brian Tyler Cohen, people who are out there, Politics Girl, anybody like that, they're going to call them out, and they're going to have no repercussions of it. And they're going to say it very clearly and very straightforward. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if this is a long, meandering answer, but there's just it's just broken, and they're not willing to fix it. And so we have to constantly be on them and try and hold them accountable. And the only way we can do that is by constantly pressuring them to do better, change headlines, and also be on the offensive where we can frame and in a bow and a gift say, here's what happened. Go with this. You'll get the most clicks. And like copy and paste matter, I don't care.
Right.
Like, you just present it truthfully. Don't insert Donald, a poison, into the article. He doesn't even need to be there. And so this is the problem we're having. It's the infection of Donald Trump. He spreads like a wildfire. He's been a pandemic on our society, or I forget what Dr. Bandy Lee says, something about he is contagious in a negative way, where he's on TV. He normalizes bullying, beating up on people, verbally, teaches our children the wrong things. It makes it okay for people to speak in a different way, act in a different way, spreading the fact that he's a sociopath and kind of normalizing that. And we need to rid of that infection by voting him out of existence. And then, hopefully we won't have to deal with that for a few more years, unless Don Jr., Eric Trump, I'm sure that in a few years they'll run. Sorry for the nightmare there, but that's very likely.
Right. Well, I think that there's a couple things that I want to unpack. One is that there's this national scene with Trump, which gets the most national coverage. And in some ways, it's like obeying in advance, right? Tim Snyder says, don't obey in advance when you're fighting tyranny. And on the other, it seems that I'm going to have about eight hands here, by the way, that lost my train of thought. All right. So they're obeying in advance. And yet the new independent sources on Substack, or, like Queer Newsroom going on straight to TikTok, are pressuring them to change at least a little bit. People cutting the cord. I haven't had cable in a decade, maybe not that long, but everybody else I talk to talks about watching MSNBC all the time, or my dad has CNN on all the time, right? Those boomers who are still, got the TV on. And I am really glad to see that it's making some sort of difference very slowly. I did see a clip from CNN just the other day where the anchor asked a commentator, and I don't remember who it was. Maybe you'll be able to tell me. Well, what do you think of Trump's program for combating inflation versus Kamala's? And the guy's like, okay, let's back up. One, you've got Trump, who's a raving lunatic, not giving any actual plans, just throwing out lies and pretending to have a plan. And then you have Kamala, who actually has a plan. And so treating it as the same thing is really problematic. And I was so glad to see that. It was a total minority of the coverage. But I feel like if more people are empowered to say something like that on the big legacy media, that it will continue to reinforce itself. On another hand, you talked about, Don Jr. or Eric or Ivanka or whoever's going to run after Trump. It's big and it's hard, but at the state level, they've already, MAGA or whatever we're going to call it going forward, has captured a lot of states. And so while we might beat off Trump at the national level this time, which, we could talk about all the things that Kamala brings, but there's a lot of work to do at the state level and the local level. And we talk a lot here about contesting all the races and like changing the reality on the ground in the red states. So one thing I don't like to lose sight of is the fact that there's this national thing with Trump being the centerpiece. And, I gotta admit, I listened to Allison Gill, and like it's a sideshow in my mind, like what's going on with all the court cases. But I think a lot of the real change is going to come from the bottom up and from the top down. But you've got to like support that bottom if you want the top to keep moving along in the right direction. So I want to talk about, so you talk a lot about Substack, and, I was talking to my old college roommate last night, and I was like, well, she was commenting on MSNBC. I was like, do you read Substack? No, I'm not. I don't do that. Well, actually, like, that's where I get all of my news now. And I'm still on Twitter because you still got a couple good people on there. So how do we encourage people to, people who care about democracy, but not the activists who are pretty darn involved? How do we encourage them to seek independent media and independent sources when they've been so reliant on cable news for so long and they don't necessarily even see the problem?
That is a great question. That's always my stalling tactic. Whenever I say that's a great question, in regards to how to answer, what I've seen is that, a lot of times people are reluctant at first because they don't want to just go out and trust someone. And I say, don't trust anyone. Like, don't just go out, question everything. And so you'll see a bunch of people who are subscribers of mine questioning me like immediately. And I get things wrong. People get things wrong. It happens. I always say, point it out, call it out. Like, if I have a typo, tell me. Like, I don't want a typo lingering around or whatever. If there's something that you don't agree with, don't agree with me on it. Tell me what's up. Like, if there's something that I said that's just factually wrong, then obviously point that out. We'll issue correction. But it's about the law of averages. Like, how often is this person going to guide me in the right direction where I can have that positive vibe, this good kind of feeling? Or if there's a bad thing that's happening, how is it going to be measured where I'm not going to be driven completely insane, or told a story where I'm gaslit or misled or lied to, or things are fabricated, or where the opinion overrides the facts to a level where I can't see an actual reality. I mean, there's a bunch of things that people have disagreed with me over time. One of the things I've debated people for a long time, but like where one of my arguments that a lot of people fought with me about is I was like, oh, immediately after I saw the debate, I was like, Biden won. Like, you can't equate this liar. And, what people saw was a person that spoke strongly or whatever, and his tone, his demeanor, like things that I wouldn't credit to winning a debate, PR, wise and whatnot, who can throw slams or, whatever. And Biden didn't know his voice level or whatever was going on there. He was sick. I right out the gate, I was like, he won the debate. Like, and a lot of people disagreed with me on that. I was one of the few people who said that. I stick by that now still. But that is an example of like an opinion where some people were like, this is not a fact. Like, I don't believe this. And I was like, well, tell me about it. Like, so I think there's a sounding board there. It's more of a community where, mine has a zero tolerance of bullying. Like, you get banned immediately. There's no tolerance of that. I have the ability to be able to screen commenters before they come in, so we don't have anyone harassed. Debating is welcome. Curse words are fine as long as they're not directed at people. And just forming a new kind of environment where it's safer to speak your mind, but at the same time, there's a limit to, like, we don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable, and that's the key. That's what people have done, foreign entities and people who are here with troll farms. The goal, when they troll you in mass, or when they, I'm one of the most trolled people on the internet. And I would say, like, the goal is to make you stop doing the work, make you stop organizing, getting people out there to knock doors, make phone calls, write postcards, things like that. And so we have to make sure that we push back against everything like that. And I think there had to be some kind of balance between what's going on with this template sort of news and the truth coming out and being presented on a more frequent basis. And I think when you gather all the different people together, me, you, AG, and everybody else on Substack, you have its own sort of network where if you're reading the right sort of things, then you can get facts of what's going on right now. It's not as much of the breaking news angle. It's more of, let's cut through the junk. And so you've got those two where you may watch news, but you should welcome in other thoughts and not just base anything off of that. So getting people removed from that screen, I mean, it's an addiction, right? Like, they get addicted to that breaking news and the crime and everything that's going on in the screen. And, oh my gosh, like, this is happening and this analyst is this. I mean, everything for the most part that I see on cable is not news. It's analysis, opinion based. Like, it's, let's get these expert opinions about campaign. I've worked on hundreds, if not 1,000 more campaigns in my life in all 50 states. And I see people analyzing campaigns on there that I've never heard of in my entire life. And I'm like, they're like, they're a Democratic campaign consultant. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know everybody, but this person shouldn't be speaking on CNN like they know what they're doing. When you hear them talk and they're like, well, I worked on this one campaign, and I just am like flabbergasted. I'm like, why did this person go on to represent when they don't have the personal experience to actually give? It doesn't seem like they have the experience to do it, but they had the right connections to get on air in the first place. They wrote the right book at the right time. They were on one race where they streamlined and rose to the top, things like that, but not really. I think cutting through the crap of all this, it is nearly impossible to find a way to get people peeled away. But to split the difference, it's all about word of mouth. It's all about making sure people share the content, and it's got to be vouched for. It's got to be endorsed. And I think it's a balance where there is no easy way to get people off the screen and reading another screen. The only way to do it is to, market in regards to read this as well, do this as well, watch this interview as well, to try and balance that. Like, don't just focus on one thing. Never just focus on one outlet. Don't do the Fox News trick. Don't just watch MSNBC or CNN. Don't just read WAPO or New York Times, anything exclusively. Get multiple content creators. Look online. Don't just use one social media basket. Like, don't depend on one thing for all your news, your information, or the diet that you have with the data that you consume. Like, you got to make sure that meshes up. It's got to be a healthy diet there, and it should never just be dependent on one thing. So it's a constant slog. There is no easy way to get people off of there and onto everything else. But what we've seen through my work, specifically, what I've seen people is they start to read and they start to see the other things that we present, and they start to believe and open maybe their mind to something different than just this, or at least be more critical based on, hey, well, here's a warning sign. Like, just look for this. And they start to look for things and they're like, that's weird. I didn't realize what was going on here. And they start to open their eyes. They start to spread out and look beyond Substack and beyond Twitter, and not just one news source. And they start being critical of it themselves. And that causes them to watch less cable news. So, yeah, the answer to your question in the longest way possible, there is no easy way to get them, what we would say an average voter, to kind of look at something else. It's on us to try and capture attention, but at the same time, maybe go on cable news to point out their inconsistencies, and remind people that they're not the only news sources, and most of it is not news. It's an analysis,
Right.
opinion.
An opinion. Well, that's an awful lot of hard work.
It is. Yeah, that's what it. I mean, like, I don't know how many tweets I've ever done or posts. It's hundreds of thousands. Like, it is a constant. When we were like, I was kind of by myself on an island early 2016. I was like, oh my gosh, he might win, and everybody's like, are you kidding? He's not gonna win. And I was like, look at this. And I was always behind the scenes on campaigns, organizing, did field, Scantron machines back in the day. Carrie Edwards.
God, I haven't heard that word in a long time. Okay.
Yeah. Like, so I don't even know if that's what they're called. It was the little brown things with the lasers, and you're lucky to get that one, or you'd, I mean, I got hot dogs for the staff, as an intern, things like that. And then you'd make phone calls. And I remember when I was making phone calls, I was plowing through, and he's like, are you really making these phone calls? And I was like, well, why don't you test, like, pick out random ones and then call them? He's like, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that with everybody. And then he went through and he started doing that, and he had to reassign people because they weren't doing their job. He was wondering, because I would call so quickly, and because I wouldn't pause in between. And so that was when I started realizing, I'm good on the phones here. I'm good organizing events. I'm good at, or whatever, and started to find my calling. I got lost in that one. I'm sorry. But wait, where were we going with that? Now I lost my train of thought. He's right. Contagious.
So let me ask it this way. Lots of people don't think that politics really applies to them, although we all know that politics is how we put our values into the world and how we can change reality, essentially. So the people who, have busy lives, have kids in daycare, have things that come up, it's really hard to go look at 25 different sources. And so I guess the question is, maybe I should ask it a different way. I've talked to a bunch of people who say, well, our problem isn't the message. Our problem is that we don't have ways to convey the message. The right wing has bought up so much media, and Sinclair and Fox and all the other things. We need to be buying the media. We need to be the purveyors of information. And then I talked to somebody else who said, well, that's all great, but what Fox and all of them do is they give people ice cream. They give them people what they want to hear most of the time. They give them ice cream, and we try to force them to eat their broccoli, and they don't want to eat their broccoli. So my question is, are the outlets that exist a good model for additional things? So you've got Courier, you've got ProPublica, you've got all of the independent folks around Substack. A step in the right direction, or do we need to rethink the whole landscape differently?
Oh, we need to absolutely rethink the landscape and how it's been populated, because eventually, if you start one, it starts to fall into that trap again and become the next MSNBC or the next. And so you gotta avoid those pitfalls, and it's hard because you start getting sponsors, you start getting more money involved with it, and again, money enters the conversation, and then you're not independent anymore, and then you have your own station or whatever. I mean, that's really hard to do. This is not the easiest kind of roadmap. Um, for in regards to this election cycle. Now, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but it's too late for that. We cannot reframe, build the progressive media empire that we need to have to take on the right-wing media. So the best way that we have to fight back against this is to call out legacy media, mainstream media, for their inconsistencies, and pressure them to change with the power of the people, instead of having them present the world in a balanced way with a fascist pathological liar and a pro-democracy candidate who's based on truth. We have to make sure that we present the reality of it and show, his crowd sizes that are existing right now is his truthful base, his truthful reality in regards to what really supports him. A person who's an expert on Substack in regards, and also in the world, Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat said that, and I don't want to misquote her, but something along the lines of polling is bad in regards to having a democracy versus dictatorship. It's hard to read between the lines. That's why you see the blowouts in France and UK. That's why you see the problems in regard, like looked like the right was going to win. There's so much fear instilled in the person who is being asked the question. There may be fear of retribution, of like, if I don't say Trump out loud, this might actually be something else that involves something else. Like, there's things like that go through people's mind, where it needs to be factored into the conversation. And so, like, when we have the presentation of the media, when we have, like, what is fact, what is real, we have to just keep on fighting in every guerrilla, nonviolent way that we can, to present this is the truth, and scream as loud as we can for as long as we can, sprint to the finish, act like we're 5 points behind at every point, no matter what, but still walk with swagger like we're 5 points ahead. It is too late to be able to overhaul media, but it is something we absolutely must focus on, where it is boycotts, where it is making sure that we do hold press accountable, but at the same time, right? The problem we have is there are good journalists that work at these places that still present great work. And we don't want ever journalists to be targeted in a way where I've been targeted and other people have been targeted with threat after threat of violence, of burning down your house, of hurting your pets or your family or yourself, where you had to go into hiding due to that, where you've had to, defend yourself in public. It's a form of domestic terrorism, and we're not going to spring that on people. So you got to have that balance of holding press accountable, but not causing the harassment and threats against someone. At the same time, you have to call them out for it. So, we only have a limited amount of time between now and the election. And so it's finding out that, like, where is that balance? Because people are like, we got to call out like an individual. We've done that before, and it does not work as well because there are bad actors in the system. And so pointing out one journalist is not always helpful. After the fact, when it comes down to after this election and after we're trying to slog through the mud here, we have time to get organized and figure out the best ways forward, how we can make sure that there isn't propaganda on the airwaves, but also people can speak the truth.
Right.
But we don't need to give even space to Nazis. Like, we don't need, like, there's free speech, and then there's also the freedom for people to be free and be comfortable and not have swastikas all over the place. Like, there's a way. Like, there's right and wrong in the world. There's truth and lies, and I think reminding people of that. I think the leadership of Harris, the leadership of Walz, the leadership of this new campaign team, and everything, their momentum is not going to slow. The runway is so short here into early voting, and the different catalysts that are going to be cast this week alone, they're not going to slow down. This isn't going to change. And I think one of the biggest ways, I guess the bottom line is, one of the biggest ways we can fight against this is to get out there and do everything we can to get Democrats elected across the board, all the way down the ballot, and to do everything we can, make phone calls, do anything you can at any point where you're volunteering, making a difference. If you can only donate money, do that, but stretch yourself a little bit, push yourself a little bit more than you would have. It'll pay off. You don't know which one vote is going to win a certain election, but that is how we can get truthful people back into power, and they'll, as politicians, either pass laws or do something where they have regulations changed, or they appoint different people who aren't going to tolerate these sort of things, where they can change the rules, and there's actual repercussions to lying. You can't just run around and say Trump won the election, which was one of the biggest frauds ever perpetrated on the American people ever. And you can't, I think, again, electing Harris Walz is a start, and I don't want to equate, well, this has to be equal to this. You elect Trump, it is going to be propaganda like you've never seen before. He'll be accidentally rounding up his political opponents and act like it's part of his mass deportation program, and we accidentally got Scott. I don't know how he got in the mix here. We can't find him. And it's like, we can see these sort of horror stories that could potentially come out from his lies. And on I think it was a few days, maybe the day after his inauguration, I'm on MSNBC. I'm sitting there. Joy Reid's right here next to me, and she starts her show. And we, for the first time, see the alternative facts quote.
Yes.
And I think we had already seen the Spicer quote of, "This is the biggest inauguration crowd ever." And then she's like, "Well, these are alternative facts," Kellyanne Conway said.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, I'm like, it's like a glass table, so I'm looking at it and I didn't break it with the grip that I had on it. I'm sitting there, and you see Joy turn and say, "So, Scott, your thoughts?" And I was just like, resign. Just resign. Like, what are you talking about? Resign. And I just remember me being like, well, be careful. Like, this is a new administration. You know, you have blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nah, screw it. No, nope, no holding back. And I remember saying, and I hate this, but it's the truth. No matter what the allocation of resources and money that the government has, it's life or death scenarios, whether it's food safety. It could be something as simple as that. Cutting back regulations is going to lead to people dying. You know, things like that. It's, you know, it said that their lies are going to lead to people dying, Americans specifically. Like, this is what happens if a government is built off of lies. People are going to die, and then COVID.
All right. And little did you know how
No.
prescient
But I
that
knew that this was dangerous and this was going to potentially hurt us. But getting that truth and it, you know, getting that back, you make a great point there. I mean, that's voting. I know that, like, that, as I didn't figure that out completely. I mean, I've said this out loud, but combining the two there is like, voting gets us back so that we have standards and we hold people accountable and we don't accept lies as the norm. We don't accept a convicted felon, you know, to be at the top of a ticket. We have to reset our values. We have to make it okay to be a compassionate person who cares about their neighbor, who isn't just going to let someone fall down. I don't care if you have a red hat. If you fall face forward in the dirt, I'm going to help you up because it's the right thing to do. I'm not going to point and laugh at you, red hat or not.
right.
You know, this is not the right way to do things. I know that it was gimmicky, it was pro wrestling, and it was fun for a little bit, but it's killed people. It's hurt people. It's hurt millions of families throughout this country. It's hurt people throughout the world that we haven't seen. And it has cost us dearly. And the positive part of all of this is that maybe we can learn that the internet is one of the most dangerous weapons ever made. And we need to protect ourselves from it. And we need to protect ourselves from the different kind of information that we're presented. We need to have a diet in regards to how we consume that information. And we should have rules and regulations around how it's presented. And there should be some kind of accountability for people who are willing to spread lies, no known lies, that are not presented as opinion, where it's fake news. And there should be laws against that, and people should go to prison if they do something like that. When there's schemes like that, criminal conspiracies that hurt people based on lies, that make people think, I'm going to go and I'm going to march to the Capitol. And look, Trump just broke open the door to the Capitol and I'm going to go in and I'm going to go kidnap somebody. Like, what are you talking about? You have, like, one of my buddies, you have Harry Dunn wiping off bear spray from his face so he can read his phone, so he can call his daughter and say, I'm alive. All because one dude wanted to try and throw a coup, because his coup via Supreme Court, his coup overall via support the courts, his coup via elections, his coup attempts that all failed. So he tried violence. He tried violence via delay. If I can delay this count, this certification, maybe I can stretch this out and stay beyond the 20th. And it didn't work. Anyways, so having truth continue to be in the White House, having that take over our government and get rid of the MAGA stench in regards to Congress, doing this, that helps restore everything so that people like you and me can make sure that press is truly held accountable in regards to just telling the truth, telling facts, and going back to telling the real stories and doing real journalism where it's not just quoting people and doing breaking news. It's actually, here are the facts presented like this, and whether you like it or not, these are the facts.
Right.
And back to that, where it's not just about the money, where it's not just about the power and access. Um, and I think vote Harris Walls. I'm just going to be real partisan about that and vote Dems all down the ballot, because there's no truth left in the Republican Party right now. I don't see it. It's not going to happen. That's our first way out. That's our first big test as a nation. You want truth. You want the media to, evolve to a better place than voting. We vote our way out, and that there's no easy exit. It's going to be another long slog. The causes never end. We could have complete control of the government. Then we have to do the things that we pledge. And that takes pressure, in regards to that. So, this is, it really is, it's fascinating how that works, but that's how I see it, is voting. You want things to change, you got to vote. You got to vote. You got to get people to vote. You got to do things you may normally not do. Talk to the person who you think, I'm sure they're in it for MAGA. Like, I don't know, text them, say hi, how are
Right.
you? Things like that. Start a conversation. You may regret it, but try it on first sight. They may surprise you. This is a changing environment, and I think this positivity is contagious, and people want it. They crave it. They love it. They miss it. And I did. I've wanted it for forever. Since 2009, standing next to Barack Obama, the day he was inaugurated, dancing by his side and Michelle's, and 41 other friends that I have, like Lily Ledbetter and Quincy Lucas, just, dancing to Stevie Wonder, singing Signed, Sealed, Delivered, and a bunch of other people. Like, that kind of joy where it's just like, you feel like we can actually change the world and deliver thousands of petitions to people who don't want them in Congress, with a smile on your face, and say, everybody wants health care.
Mm-hmm.
Do your job. And so I think we can do the same thing with media. We'll think big, keep on pushing big. And I mean, it took a second to figure that out, but brilliant question. That is a brilliant question. Thank you for asking it.
Well, thank you for thinking about it and being very thoughtful about your answer. There are so many other things I want to talk about, but I'm not gonna. But I think it was a really fascinating look into how it's all interconnected as well. And also the thing that you said last is the joy is so welcome, right? I was one of those, Biden's the nominee. He's going to do great. He's been doing great. He's fine. And then all of a sudden it changed. And, Kamala consolidated her power so quickly. And I was like, I can actually breathe again, right? I was doing everything I do because action is hope. And then she came, and then it was joyful. And I thought, wow, I didn't know I was missing this. Right. But it's made so much difference. And so thank you for coming to speak to us. And is there anything else I didn't talk about that you would want to say?
No. You can check out my thing at dworkinsubstack.com. I'll get yelled at if I don't. No, I'm kidding. But the only thing I would say is that, this is me talking. I'm not always the biggest ray of sunshine. I do talk more positively, even if it's dark times. But there is true joy. Like, this is real. This is real. This is real life. This isn't fantasy. I think I got endorsed by Taylor Swift by an AI image so I can spread disinformation around the place. This is a campaign that'll get endorsed for real by Taylor Swift.
Yes, it was.
And so I would say that it's this is very real, and this will not slow down as long as we keep the momentum up. As long as we do the work, then we will win. And that doesn't end in November. That ends in January. We've learned that.
Well, it doesn't end at all because
it never ends. The slog never ends, as we talk about it.
Yeah.
We take a breath when the swearing in.
Yeah.
And that's, that's when we have sort of a finish line with a new start. But it really is, we don't have much time left. Every day counts, and just do what you can. Do what you can, and know that everything you do is appreciated. Don't let anybody belittle you. If all you have time to do is tweet something online, that matters. If you go out there and you make 10 phone calls, or you can only call your friends and family, that matters. If you can only text a few people in between work at your lunch shift or something like that, that matters. If it's something where you send out a short video on Instagram and it goes to your followers, and you don't think you have many followers, you never know. You never know how far that goes. So everything you do, it does matter. And so try and do everything you can today to make the biggest difference for tomorrow, because what we do now is what equates in that election win in November. And so just keep on moving onward. We got this. As long as we do the work, which I believe we will, I think we'll end up with a victory, and it will be a turning point in American history like we haven't seen before. Like this, I think this will be a phenomenal win, and the end of Donald Trump.
From your mouth to the universe's ears, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much.